There is a dangerous illusion that still rules the minds of many men. The idea that to win a woman, you need to prove your own worth. They run after her, show excessive affection, are always available, and believe that this way they will be safe in her heart. But what these men don't realize is that female obsession isn't born from love given easily. It's born from a mystery that is never fully revealed. A man who gives too much of himself, who strips himself emotionally without criteria, who turns conquest into servitude, becomes predictable. And what is predictable, no matter how well-intentioned, never causes fascination. It never sticks in the mind. It never leaves a memory. A woman may even admire him, she may even like him, but she will never become hostage to a man she understands completely, because the female mind does not fall in love with logic. It gets lost in the enigma. The mistake modern man makes is to believe that more is more. More attention, more declarations, more presence. When in fact, what ignites deep desire, what creates that restlessness that makes you think about him for no reason, is not constant presence. It is strategic absence. It is not direct confession. It is carefully planted doubt. True power lies in what is withheld, not in what is offered. Machiavelli never taught us to shout to be heard. He taught us to be silent at the right moment, to create unrest in others through emotional control. He knew that domination does not lie in the act of pleasing, but in the act of making ourselves necessary and indecipherable. And when we talk about activating a woman's obsession, we are talking about exactly that, becoming an emotional presence that she cannot catalogue, a man she feels but does not understand. Look around you. How many men do you know who do everything for a woman and yet are ignored? And how many do almost nothing but dominate her thoughts for days, weeks, even months? The difference is not in what they do. It is in us. It is not rhythm, already selective delivery, already value posture. Obsession is born from a gap, from a carefully created void. The brain seeks to fill what is missing, and it is in this space that you plant your presence. She may desire the available man, but she never forgets the man who made her feel without giving away the key, the one who was kind but never needy, present but not predictable, clear in his intentions but mysterious in his feelings. Because this kind of man doesn't just enter her life, he settles into her imagination. And the cruelest, the man who explains himself too much, who justifies himself, who runs after validation, makes a fatal mistake. He becomes too accessible, too easy, too deliverable, and what comes easy naturally loses value. As much as she says she wants transparency and delivery, human emotional nature still reacts to mystery, to what defies understanding. It's organic, it's psychological, it's Machiavellian. So, you need to understand. It's not about playing cheap games or manipulating feelings. It's about reversing logic, understanding that it's not by shouting "I love you" that you gain respect, but by being the presence that doesn't need to speak to be remembered. A man's true power lies in what he doesn't give away right away. It lies in his ability to hold back, to make himself felt without becoming an open book. Obsession begins when she senses that there is something in you that has not yet been explored. A trace of unpredictability, an emotional layer that she has not yet accessed. And this cannot be forced. It is built, with emotional control, with strategic withdrawal, with calculated silence. Because while others rush to show value, you walk with the tranquility of someone who already knows their own price. This is the essence of Machiavellian dominance, and that is why, in this video, you will discover 5 invisible rules that operate silently but devastatingly on the female mind. These are emotional strategies that do not depend on shouting, proof, or exaggerated efforts, only on emotional intelligence and subtle positioning. These are laws that, when applied correctly, will make any woman think twice before forgetting you. Stay with me until the end, because once you understand these rules, you will never run after them again. And the best part, you will start to be remembered even when you are not there. Now that you understand that obsession is not born from excess, but from enigma, it is time to delve into the silent strategies that operate behind the female mind. These are rules that are not learned from popular advice, nor from the desperate cries of male need. They are invisible laws, whispered by Machiavelli, that act in silence, in absence, in the doubt that burns more than the presence that suffocates. The first rule is simple but brutal. Give crumbs of presence, but feasts of absence. While most men believe that being present all the time is synonymous with value, the real emotional impact comes from strategic withdrawal. Absence, when well calculated, does not cool desire, it intensifies it. Because it is in the void that her imagination works. She does not get lost in the man who is always available. She becomes addicted to the one who appears, makes an impression, and disappears. The one who leaves traces and then silence. Desire is not born in constant touch, but in the absence that provokes thirst. The second rule is even more refined. Be transparent on the surface but opaque at the core. Yes, she needs to trust you to feel secure, but that doesn't mean opening yourself up emotionally like a cheap book. Show your intentions, but never give away your feelings. Be clear about what you want, but vague about how you feel. This throws her off balance emotionally. She starts to wonder, what is he thinking? Why does he look at me like that? And then disappear. It is in this emotional gap that fascination is born. Mystery is the only prison she enters smiling. The third rule is the most underrated weapon. Create rituals that only you can break. Every human being is driven by habits, by repetitions that bring us security. When you establish a small emotional ritual, a nightly phone call, a phrase that only you say, a recurring gesture, you are building a subconscious bond. And when you take it away, when you break the pattern, she misses it. Not the gesture itself, but the emotional presence behind it. And when the lack comes, it is too late. She is already connected. And she will want you back not for what you do, but for the absence of what you did. The fourth rule seems contradictory, but it is devastating. Be kind, but never available. Genuine kindness charms, but total availability devalues. You must be polite, attentive, elegant, but always in control. Show that you know how to treat someone well, but that you are not there to be chosen as a consolation prize. A woman respects a man who knows his own worth, who does not bow down, who is not there to beg for acceptance. Attraction is born when she realizes that your kindness does not come from necessity, but from choice. And finally, the fifth rule. Always give her the illusion of choice. Women crave freedom, but freedom without direction breeds insecurity. When you present her with options that all lead to the same outcome, you give her a sense of autonomy while maintaining control. She feels like she's making the decision, but she's actually following a script you've already written. That's not manipulation, that's orchestration. The conductor doesn't shout at the instruments, he leads them silently, and it's this sense of emotional choice that makes her surrender without realizing it. These are Machiavelli's 5 invisible rules. They don't scream, they don't plead, they don't kneel. They operate in silence on the basis of selective presence, emotional control, and perception. Because in the end, what makes a man remembered is not what he gave, but what he withheld. It's not what he said, but what she had to imagine. Obsession is born of what she felt but never understood. Now that you know these rules, you have 2 choices. Continue being the predictable man who gives everything for fear of losing, or become the man she will never forget, precisely because she was never able to fully decipher him. Once you understand the unspoken rules that trigger desire, it's time to face a brutal truth. Nothing destroys a woman's respect and obsession for a man faster than the moment he starts negotiating his own value. This is where many fall. They learn the tactics, the subtle game of mystery, absence, unpredictability. But deep down, they are still dominated by a silent fear, the fear of losing. And it is this fear that makes them give in. Explain too much, apologize for existing, adapt to what she wants to hear, adjust to what she expects. And without realizing it, they stop being men and become edited versions, manufactured to please. This is the deadly mistake. You can be strategic, silent, magnetic, but if, in the end, you are willing to bend over backwards to avoid rejection, you have already lost, because every woman feels, even without knowing how to explain it, when a man trades his essence in order to be accepted, when he exchanges a firm presence for emotional convenience, when he hides his own discomfort just to keep the mood light. That is not dominance. That is submission disguised as affection. Feminine obsession never comes from a man begging for a place. It comes from someone who imposes himself with presence and who retreats just as firmly if he is not respected. A man who knows his own worth does not negotiate with those who try to diminish him. He does not explain his price. He represents it with posture. Look, this isn't about being arrogant or uncompromising. It's about an invisible line that separates strength from weakness. You can listen, you can compromise, you can build together, but never at the cost of betraying your truth. Because every time you stray from who you really are to please someone else, you send a silent message. I'm not good enough the way I am. Please accept me. And that kills respect. And when respect dies, desire dies soon after. There are men who spend their entire lives in relationships, being loved by an edited version of themselves, a version that is tolerated, not admired, that is useful, but not desired, that is present, but not remarkable. And the worst part, they know it. They feel it in the woman's eyes, they feel it in the fatigue that comes every time they have to be someone they are not. Negotiating your own worth is like trying to decorate a cell. You can make the place more beautiful, more comfortable, but you are still trapped in a version of yourself that does not support you inside, and sooner or later, this prison becomes unbearable, because nothing hurts a man's dignity more than being accepted for what he is not. Machiavelli did not speak of fragile feelings. He spoke of strategy, of firmness, of clarity, and nothing is more Machiavellian than knowing exactly what you represent, and never asking permission to exist. The man who awakens lasting desire is the one who lives in alignment with his essence, who does not bend over backwards to please, who does not fear the rejection of those who do not recognize his value. He doesn't fear rejection because he understands. The worst rejection is the one you experience in silence every day, next to someone who accepts everything, except your truth. He doesn't beg for validation because he's already validated himself. He doesn't force connection because he understands that what's real fits and what needs to be forced is already crooked. And the most paradoxical thing? When a man stops negotiating his essence, when he stands up without fear, he becomes even more desired. Because respect generates attraction. Clarity generates impact. Firmness generates desire. Mystery may spark, but it is the non-negotiable value that maintains. And in the end, it is not about being accepted by everyone. It is about being remembered with reverence by those who understand who you are. So remember this: the biggest mistake a man can make is to abandon himself so that he won't be abandoned by someone else. That's not love. That's emotional imprisonment. A man in alignment with his truth is never alone. He is at peace. And that peace is more powerful than any momentary approval. Negotiating your own worth is a slow emotional suicide, and the cure for it is not to shout louder, it is to be more silent, to withdraw with dignity, to show with quiet presence that your value is not in being chosen, it is in being respected. Now get ready for the last point, because in the end, the unforgettable man is not the one who strives to be loved. It is the one who never bows down to be tolerated. And that is where true power begins. Now that you understand each layer of the game, the silence that dominates, the absence that addicts, the mystery that holds you captive, and the value that is never negotiable, it's time to close with the most powerful truth of all. The unforgettable man is not the one who loves the most, gives the most, surrenders the most. He is the one who remains whole when the world tries to bend him. He doesn't need to prove anything, because his presence already communicates everything. His gaze says, "I know who I am." And this certainty is frightening, because most people are always explaining themselves. Most people try to be someone to please, but the man who does not bend carries a silent strength, not through brute force, but through inner clarity. Machiavelli did not preach coldness, he preached lucidity. He understood that respect is not asked for, it is imposed. And when a man lives according to his truth, he does not need everyone's approval. He becomes respected even by those who criticize him, because truth scares, truth bothers. But truth above all endures. This type of man is rare, because he chooses the hardest path, not to deform himself to fit in. He prefers true solitude to the companionship that demands self-betrayal. He would rather lose a woman than lose himself in the process of trying to keep her, and that is precisely why, when she leaves, she feels like she has left something that cannot be recovered. Because he was not just another one. He was unique. Not because he was perfect, but because he was whole. And yes, that takes courage. Courage to be silent when everyone shouts. Courage to stand firm when your heart wants to run after you. Courage to look in the mirror and not hate yourself for having given in once again out of fear of loss. This man's strength is not in his muscles, nor in his sharp words. It is in the soul that refuses to be bent by lack. So, if you are going to lose someone, let it be for being whole. Because the man who walks with his truth is never alone. He is at peace. He does not beg, does not explain himself, does not try to be something he is not. He simply exists. And because he exists authentically, he remains in the memory of those who cross his path, not as just another name, but as a presence that left its mark. That is true power. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to never let go of yourself. The power to look a woman in the eyes and say, without words, "I want you, but I don't need you. And if being with you means giving up being me, then I'd rather go." Because in the end, the respect you command will always be proportional to the truth you uphold. If this message touched you, share it with those who need to hear it. Let's free a generation of men who no longer want to be accepted with a mask, but respected with truth. Because the world doesn't need more nice men. It needs real men. Men who don't give in. Men who stand firm.